I've kind of sort of deliberately saved some of the big, what is the future of journalism questions that I was going to ask you two for the whole panel, because I think everyone's going to have an input. And we do also have some questions from you. But I was actually interested in another thing, Mark, I saw you reported as saying about the biggest challenge for journalists at the moment, and you said it was time. Can you expand on that?
Yes. I think we're in the era of journalism, and reporters doing 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 stories a day. That you can't be a proper journalist doing that, and I think you need time to go out, gather the information, talk to people, think about what you're doing, and then write it. And I think this whole speed issue, the warp speed of getting information out now is a real problem. And I was talking about that today. I think it's a major impediment to quality journalism, the speed at which journalists have to work and the amount of stories that they have to do. I know that it's an economic reality, but it's a problem.
I heard Paula Penfold speak about the Tainapora story last year, and I said, I actually asked her that question, how did you find the time to do this on top of all the other stuff you're expected to do? And she said, we did it after hours, which is kind of amazing that it comes to that. I mean, that's remarkable.
Yeah, I think it does come to that, and I think that's no journalist regards it as a job anymore. If you're in it for a job, you won't be in it for long. It is a vocation. It is something you do because you really love doing it. And all the good journalists I know work after hours, work really long hours, and the worst thing is they don't get paid for it either now. Experience isn't valued in the same way as it was, and that's another big problem. All these senior journalists are exiting the media, or have exited, or been exited as well. So
do you guys find that as well? I mean, I'm suspecting it's an issue with you because you get into stories, don't you, Kirsty?
Yeah, but I'm what Nikki Hager called me a kakapo. Means I'm rare and endangered because I have a full-time investigative job, and there's only a few of us, and we know that we're really lucky, and so we really strive on our team at the Herald to try and kind of do as much as we can to alleviate the pressure on everybody else. So we will step in and just do a feature that week because it's an issue that needs to be done, or somebody needs to go away, so we will step in. Like, none of us, we're all so aware that we are so privileged that we try and do that, but equally, I don't know how long it can go on. We are lucky. My thoughts are that the best thing that could happen would be if people started to pay for journalism, and then we would actually get paid.
How many of you are there? Just out of interest?
So there's myself, Olivia, who's here tonight, Matt Nippert, David Fisher, Phil Taylor, Carolyn Ming. There's actually quite a lot of us. There's probably 7 of us. We have kind of differing roles, but we are really, really privileged and grateful to the Herald for doing that.
And I think that's actually something that needs acknowledging, because usually we're saying Herald website clickbait, but it's also the Herald that maintains an investigative team and a data journalism team, and no one else is doing that to that extent. Guyon, do you worry about, do you ever think you made a poor career choice? Because I do sometimes.
Some of my listeners probably do. But no, I've had a fantastic time in journalism and done an incredible amount of fun stuff, but it's just changing so quickly. It's not long ago I was working with Mark and with Paula Penfold on Third Degree, and before that 60 Minutes. We would have a month to do a story. A month to do a television story, and what you could do with good cameramen, good producers, good journalists was phenomenal. And the power of television when you've actually spent that long bringing something. Paula Penfold and Eugene Bingham got someone out of jail. It's a phenomenal thing to do, and the power of television when it's actually done well like that is an immense and the really strong public good. And what Mark's been talking about tonight is absolutely true. The business model which backs that up is completely broken. And we're really going to have to look for new sources of doing that. And it has to be valued as a public good. People have to realise what are the consequences of not having that, of not being able to hold politicians to account, of not being able to dig into things like tax evasion or whatever it is. And the impact of that is a massive democratic deficit, and we're seeing that in parts of the world. And people need to realise it's not just about, some journalists are going to lose their jobs. I mean, who cares about journalists? They don't care, and they shouldn't care about, whether someone has a job or not. That's not their problem. The problem is a deeper, bigger one than that, which is you can't function as a proper civic society and as a strong democracy if you don't have those platforms. You simply can't do it. People talk about post-truth, whatever the catchphrase is. You're basically in a world where you can get away with anything. I mean, I want these guys to be sitting around a cabinet table saying, shit, we're not going to get away with this on Morning Report, or 60 Minutes, or someone is going to dig in, or the Herald's going to find out. Because that's what they do. They think, shit, am I going to be able to get away with this? And if they think they can get away with it, and I'm only going to be asked who my favourite Olympian is on my Monday morning interview, and this happens, or what I thought of the rugby mate on the weekend, then they are going to... You see a society slip. You don't have to look far around the world, and it will, and it'll slip. And that's why I think that's the case we need to make, not us poor journalists. It's what we will lose if you lose that sort of stuff.
Yeah, well said.
And Mark sounded a note of hope that he thinks people are getting to grips with that. Do you agree?
I don't know. I'm not sure about that, actually. Why are you hopeful?
Because he went to a conference in Wellington. And they clapped.
I just think that the more... Like Tim's right, since we've been out of our respective organisations, we've become a lot less tribal, and we've talked to a lot of people. And the one thing that gives us a bit of confidence and hope is the amount of people that say to us, we need quality journalism, we need it. And they're from all walks of life. And Tim, that's right, isn't it? We've run into
Yeah, it's unsolicited, and it's from your own personal networks and their networks that people just run into. They're saying, why can't we have what they felt was the journalistic role before? So I think there's it's not just people telling us what we want to hear. We're not talking about just people across meeting rooms. We're talking about the general view that something's not right in what journalism can do for the country or the place, and people are feeling that they need to make it right, one way or the other. They don't know what quite to do, but yeah.
The question, the thing is though, we have to get them to pay for it, and that is such a hard thing, particularly when, like, I look at my own daughter. She's grown up with free access to everything. She breaks the law, and not in a bad way, but she does, and she doesn't think she is. And so I think getting people to pay is our challenge. And it's a big challenge, Russell, and you've experienced it, and I don't know really the answer to that.
My own view is I think that people need to call on government to actually fund it publicly rather than asking people to pay. And look, I'm appreciative to everyone who actually pays for Radio New Zealand. It's amazing. I mean, it's yours. I hope you get some value out of it. But, if we're going to start levying people small amounts on here and there, as Mark says, culturally, you can't get the toothpaste back into the tube in that respect. If people have watched the Herald and read the Herald and watched this and that for free, it's pretty hard to get them to pay for it. My own view is that you're going to need to convince the public it's worth shouting loud enough. And the government can afford this. I mean, this is a $250 billion economy. I mean, what does it put into public broadcasting every year? Jane Wrightson can tell us. How much? 80 million into public broadcasting. But
most of that's not for journalism.
No, that's not for print journalism in any way, shape, or form.
And I think we need to look at that.
Yeah.
I think we need to look at not only broadcast but print as well, and have a pot of money.
And we need to think about, do we want decisions made on funding by partisan political interests and they will be partisan at certain times. Maybe
That's
not,
why
maybe,
you need a better structure around it. Like
Sure.
in the BBC, you don't just have one. You have a better, more of a arm's length approach.
Yeah.
You know, you don't just have in New Zealand. You have the minister appoints a board. You know, and it's a bit too close. I think we need to think about those structures too.
But equally, I mean, I think that the Herald does campaigns all the time in which we raise money for things. So does Stuff, so does TV. Campbell used to do it all the time. If we drew a line in the sand and said, look, humans, this is what it's come to. We can't afford to fly a person to Wellington to investigate this thing that is central to not only human rights but democracy. You know, if we said you need to start paying, then, you know, you sponsor a child for $1 a day. You can sponsor your local newspaper. It's the cost of a coffee.
But you kind of do, because you pay $2.60 a day to your
That's
local
true.
newspaper.
This is true. It's
If you buy a
$2.60.
newspaper. So, you know,
But I just think
it's
that
the digital part of it. that-
equally,
yeah.
like, if we put as much effort into trying to promote ourselves and trying to draw public attention, it's what we're good at. It's what we do for jobs. We draw public attention to other issues. If we could somehow draw it to ourselves, I think it's just as important as getting the government to fund it. And maybe it's all part of the same parcel. But I don't think we should give up on people actually paying for things altogether just yet.
Yeah.
It's Google and Facebook, and they're parasites on the media industry.
All right.
They are sucking money out of the media industry that pays for good journalism. Mark identified it before.
So Mark Graham, magazine publisher, has put it to us that Google and Facebook are parasites that are sucking money.
85% of all digital revenues in the US go to Facebook and Google.
And increasingly here. And they pay no tax here.
No. Bernard Hickey made the point today that he and his wife paid more tax than Google in New Zealand last year.
So how do we address that?
It's government action.
Where's the government?
Well, that's you tell me.
Sounds like this needs some organisation, and it's interesting, the idea of public-funded media. And Duncan Grieve wrote a column that I thought had some merit, but I think we can't put all this on NZ On Air, and I'm sure Jane Wrightson, who's in the audience, will be relieved to hear that. This needs something new, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think I'm not suggesting, you know, that's the only stream of funding at all. You know, obviously, you know, commercial and private media has got a big role to play. I just think that if people value it and think it's important enough that their taxes should go to it, then, you know, let's have that debate.
Should we go rattle through a few questions from the audience?
Should we choose one at random?
Yeah.
Okay. Let us go with this one. What are your thoughts on the underrepresentation of people of colour in journalism and media?
I think we've got it.
Well done.
Well, Tim is part Tongan, so I think he should answer this.
This is actually a subject obviously quite close to my heart, and one that I did a talk down in at Wintec last week about Māori representation, Pacific representation in New Zealand, and I sort of talked about the fact that it has to start at journalism schools and then journalism schools, and there are no longer, for instance, the bicultural journalism degree no longer exists. There's a Pacific journalism degree at AUT, and I think that's about the extent of it. Anecdotally, I get told all the time about how newsrooms are becoming more diverse. But when it comes to print journalism, I, as a mana editor, really struggle to find new writing talent. A lot of Māori get ushered into broadcasting, into television, into radio, but I feel like very few have been encouraged to write. Is this, I mean, how important is it to, say, the head of a newsroom to ensure that you get that balance of perspectives as far as sort of taken from Māori, Pacific, Asian cultural perspectives?
Oh, look, it's vital, and it's been a failure, sustained failure for so long, not just by newsroom bosses and people who have made their calls, or by in terms of employment, but by the flow of and the stimulation and the kind of encouragement to people to take up this cause and journalism and reporting and stay with it. and stay with it in text and digital, not just be attracted perhaps to the funded Māori TV or wherever. But over all the years, the discussion is constant, and that I was there in the Herald, and the attempts to not just be satisfied with representation, but to expand beyond that were constant as well. But we failed. Yeah.
And it strikes me also that when you get that right, you also get new and different kinds of stories. I mean, just the simple thing of having a reporter who can read Chinese text will get you a whole lot of stories. So there are benefits to it as well.
I don't just think it's a failure of the industry. Like, I've been into a few journalism schools lately, and they are predominantly Pākehā. But you have to look as well. Like, I was the education reporter last year, and you look at the statistics of our young Māori and Pacifica kids coming through to university. They are so well below Pākehā and Asian kids that it's like you're on the back foot from the start, and then the degrees that they are going into aren't journalism. So it's not just us, it's everyone. But we should be responsible for putting it out there earlier, like you said, Leonie. And before journalism school, high school, earlier.
And I wonder whether the way the media covers some of these issues and the focus that it places on some of these issues is a turn-off too. Yeah. Whether if your culture is represented more in the crime stories and the sports stories and other stories, then maybe that's a factor as well. So I think we have to look to ourselves. I think I agree with Tim. I think the media's failed pretty badly on this stuff. And Māori and Pacific, there's good stuff happening, and you've got Māori TV and stuff, and there's a lot of Pacifica programs as well. I think the massive Asian voice in New Zealand, I mean, I'm fascinated to find out what these stories are, and I just don't think we're doing a very good job at all of actually covering these stories for New Zealand, because we haven't got the expertise in doing it, and it's that presence just isn't there.
Yeah, I think there's another problem with this, and I had a long discussion with Nikki Forbes about it, is that we often in newsrooms hire one or at best two, and those journalists, Māori journalists or Pacific journalists, they can't survive in a newsroom with that number. So you need to hire 4 or 5 and have enough collegiality for them to flourish. And that's something I only woke up to very late in the piece.
And I think you need to not dictate to them. Like, if they are going to be in your newsroom, you need to give them a voice, and you need to listen when they talk. So if a Pacifica or a Asian journalist says, this is wrong, this is how we should be covering the story, this is what the community thinks, then you should listen to it. And I don't think that's always what happens in a Pākehā-centric newsroom.
Those were really interesting answers, actually. Should we go for another one?
The Spinoff have been discussing sponsored investigative journalism. Discuss. I don't know when the Spinoff were discussing this.
Well, just as a general principle. So this extremely important investigation brought to you by ASB Bank.
Does it happen? I don't know that it happens really.
Should it happen? Is it okay?
No, because you can't really in terms of if you're talking about an investigation.
Well, did Campbell do investigative journalism? On Campbell Live?
John Campbell.
Yeah, and that was sponsored by Mazda?
Yeah, I think, this story brought to you by Mazda is different to this program's kind of general ad at the start. I think there's a distinction between sponsored sort of segments or shows and when you say we've investigated special needs education with the help of whomever. I don't think you can, and I'd be old-fashioned on that.
I think there is, though, a way of perhaps crowd-funding investigations by saying, all right, we're going to investigate, perhaps as the Spinoff has, the Auckland housing crisis. Who wants to contribute to this? And people will put money into that. I don't particularly like the model because I think some stories go nowhere. As you know, Guyon, having worked on investigations,
several of mine went nowhere.
and some unexpected things go somewhere. So I don't like the model particularly, but I can see that it maybe has some place.
Right, we're going to another question now. Is there a degree of laziness amongst some journalists regarding who they seek comment from, e.g. asking the Real Estate Institute about house prices, or Garth McVicker about domestic abuse, or Bob McCoskrie about fucking anything? I mean, there is a temptation when you're time pressed. You know that Bob McCoskrie will pick up the phone. Can we get away from... Yeah, there are talking heads who will give good quotes whether they know anything or not. Do we do too much of that?
Oh, definitely. I think the questioner is right. We are too lazy. Some of it comes back to the time pressures that Mark talks about. But you've always got time to be a little bit creative, and I think we do far too much of that. You know, there's a great wealth of talent and voices and opinions in New Zealand, and I think we do our listeners and readers and viewers a disservice when we keep going back to the same sources, and it's boring. You know, I mean, Gareth Morgan's view on everything, or whatever. I mean, you know, and once people sort of do quite well and get a bit of a profile, it's very tempting for a time-poor producer just to go back to them every time. But I personally think we need to do better.
I used to, when I was editor of the paper, used to stage interventions and ban people from being people we'd go to. And people would say, you can't ban someone, you can't have that restricting free speech. Well, actually, because it's just been incessant and cliched with who we're going to, and we need to broaden. So, yeah, I think you can actually take a view that we will not talk to this person for this reason, for listening to the time, you know.
I have to say my big bugbear this year was treating people who have meth contamination testing companies as experts.
Yes.
Rather than deeply conflicted parties, and I think too much of that went on. I think we're near winding up, but one thing that, and I've actually mentioned it in the chapter of the book that's coming out this weekend, is that if there's an upside to the existential crisis in journalism, it's that it's made us all think about what we're here for. And Leonie, I think I've seen that in what you've done with Mother. You've had to think about what it's there for. You know, it could have gone away, but it hasn't. Do you agree?
I do, actually. I mean, I feel like in any media path, you sort of have to pick a goal and work towards it. Otherwise, like you say, what are we here for? And that's certainly what we have done at Mana. We have goals for Māori media and Māori journalism that don't involve just sort of keeping up with news, that actually involve developing talent and investing in investigative journalism specifically to do with Māori and Māori issues. But, you know, I see examples of that in all of the great media practitioners that we have talked to tonight. I mean, it's all about finding your purpose and finding your goal and working towards that for the betterment of New Zealand media.
So has it focused your mind, Tim? I'm going to go around all of you.
Yeah,
So
look, to be cliched in a way, I think that old saying of never waste a good crisis, really, that this is a crisis and good things will come out of it once the rubbing up and the sanding down occur, you know.
Mike?
Yeah, I'm a little bit more pessimistic. I think we're going to go through a fair bit more pain yet. And I was talking, I think, to Alan Perot tonight, where he's saying that we probably have to hit rock bottom before it gets better. And I'm hoping he's not true, but I have a little suspicion that he might be. Yeah, I think and I'm thinking going back to the merger here, Fairfax and Herald, if that happens, I think there will be players, and Tim and I are hoping that we'll be one of them, that will float up in this. Where there's rationalisation, there's always opportunity, and new players will emerge. And we think there's a lot of good journalists out there. And if you look at the Spinoff too, the quality of people they can get to write articles for them staggers me. You see Jeffrey Palmer and all these people writing articles, and I think, gee, that's something to tap into, and that gives me hope too, Russell.
Kirsty?
What was the question?
The question was, if there's an upside to the current existential crisis in journalism, it's that we all have to now think what the fuck we're here for, whereas it used to be a low-threat environment and maybe we just turned up at work.
Yeah, I mean, every day I think, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this story? What purpose does it have? And whenever I go to do a story now, I write on the top, I ask myself, what am I going to achieve? Like, what is it for? What does it mean? What is it going to gain? And I will pick some themes and I will write across the top in big freaking red letters, because otherwise you forget. You're like, why am I doing this? Am I just being self-interested? What is the point? And I think that might be either personal, like me evolving, or because it is a sharp thing and I realise I'm in a privileged position and every single story that I do needs to matter, so that, places like the Herald continue to pay people like me to do my job.
Guyon?
Yeah, I kind of want to agree with Mark and largely do. I interviewed Julia Gillard last year, who said, and it's a strange analogy, but I think it works, she said that when the tariffs came off the clothing industry in Australia, everyone ran around trying to cut costs and mass produce crap, and it was a race to the bottom because they were trying to get the lowest cost for the production. Then after a while, which I think has probably happened in New Zealand, the clothing industry a little bit too, is it became bespoke and tailored and high end because there were fewer players and that's what they were doing. And I, in my more optimistic moments, hope that that's what might happen in New Zealand.
We all need to be Karen Walker. That's us for tonight. It's been magnificent. This is the best one of these we've done so far. Thanks so much to Golden Dawn, to 95 BFM, and especially to Orcon. We have 2 more of these scheduled for the year. One is around the local body elections, and then we've got a party one in December where we'll have tigers on a gold leash. Thank you for turning up. Thank you to everyone who's watched online. Thanks to Leonie. I think you've been an awesome debutante.
Thank you.
Will you come back?
I don't know anything about local elections.
Oh, just
Vote.
Yeah, I know how to do that.
yeah, cool. Okay, hey, thank you very much. Please give our panellists a big thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that was good.
Thank you.